Oh, hello, everybody. It's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell, and this is a podcast where we've got plenty to talk about because the NBA All-Star Game was last night. The NFL Draft continues. Demarcus Cousins got traded. We're going to talk about all those things. But before we get there, I'm going to tell you about Patreon. We have over 50 supporters on Patreon. We're giving them value other ways in addition to what we're doing on Waiting for Next Year. Nobody has to jump aboard on Patreon, but if you can, we're going to try and make it worth your while. Patreon.com/WFNY, Patreon.com/WFNY. And it's really interesting. You'll probably read this morning in Scott's While We're Waiting, the daily morning post, but Scott was going to take on a sports writer who kind of lost his gig because the magazine he wrote for dropped its sports coverage, and he went on to Patreon to crowdsource his continued covering of that team. I'm so bad I can't even remember which team it was right now, but in short order, he got over 1,000 people to support. And, you know, I think it was going to pay him just over $3,000 a month. And that's just the initial wave. And it's so cool because it's this idea you don't have to be the most famous person in the world. You just have to find your 10,000 biggest fans or your 5,000 biggest fans. And that's really what we're looking to do with Waiting for Next Year. We've given up this idea, I think we've given up this idea that we're going to be some giant media site, and a lot of people never really dreamed that it would ever be a giant media site, but we kind of feel like we can be the very best version of ourselves if we find the 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 people who actually find enough value in it to give us a few bucks a month or more. And that's the idea. If we can do that, we can have a nice little corner of the internet that pays some people for their words, which we think, they earn. Nobody's going to get rich, but, subsistence is a good thing. So anyway, that's patreon.com/WFNY. I didn't mean for the commercial to go on that long. I just want to talk about the All-Star Game first. It's been a fun All-Star weekend as a Cavaliers fan. Kyrie Irving came in second in the three-point shootout. He and LeBron James played pretty well in the All-Star Game itself. They danced to the Roots during their announcement, which was really fun. LeBron just looked loose. I totally would have made fun of him if he had done that when he was with the Miami Heat, because I was bitter. #bitter. But now that LeBron and Kyrie play for the Cavaliers, it's just kind of fun. Bopping their heads to the Roots, and who couldn't bop their heads to the Roots? I know everybody sits in awe of Questlove and that band, but there's a reason for that. They're just that good. But anyway, so the All-Star Game, it was just kind of a medium. The whole thing was just kind of a medium. Kyrie came in second, and I think Eric Gordon is the one who won, and that's good. I felt good for them. LeBron and Kyrie played well in the game, and then Anthony Davis got the MVP, and it's fine. That's good. I remember when Kyrie won the shootout, the three-point shootout, and when Kyrie won the All-Star Game MVP, it was validation for us as Cavaliers fans, and it was something that we needed because there was nothing else to look forward to in terms of our basketball. And now that the Cavaliers have won a championship and that they're aimed squarely for another Eastern Conference title, the only thing that matters is just showing up and making the game. Making the game is good enough. You don't need to derive any extra pleasure from meaningless awards during the All-Star Game. And because now, for Cavaliers fans, they're meaningless, but they weren't always meaningless. Tell me you didn't enjoy Kyrie winning the three-point shootout to a ridiculous degree because that was the cookie that we had, Sure, it was a it was an animal cracker with no frosting and no chocolate chips, but you eat the cookies that you're able to eat, otherwise you go without dessert completely. So now it just so happens we got cake with ice cream and pie. That was the NBA championship, so we don't have to cling to the little morsels that the NBA All-Star Weekend can give you. But those morsels are real, man. I mean, it doesn't take too long a memory to remember what it was like when the Cavaliers during the regular season couldn't give us anything to be happy about. The best you could do was have a couple of players and at that point it was the rookie-sophomore game. Now it's East versus West, or International versus America, whatever it is. But the young guys, you could take some pleasure in that, or the skills challenge, or the 3-point shootout. But there was nothing else to look forward to. Maybe Bob Sura in the dunk contest. Did that happen? I think that happened. I don't really even remember. But so it was a fun All-Star. It was a fun All-Star break. And you come back from the All-Star break to find out the morning after that the Sacramento Kings have traded Demarcus Cousins to the Pelicans for Buddy Hield, Tyreek Evans, and a draft pick, a first-round draft pick that's protected between 1 and 3. And it's absolutely underwhelming. I was reading the post on Sacktown Royalty, the well-known Sacramento Kings blog, and they don't even need hindsight to call this a fleecing. They said that the Kings fleeced themselves. And it's sad. It's embarrassing. It's the kind of front office move we've become all too familiar with in Cleveland with other teams. It feels like the kind of uphill battle you can never finish climbing as a fan. You're being led by people who have no idea what they're doing, because Demarcus Cousins is a legit player, and now the idea that they couldn't even get an unconditional first-round pick in addition to Buddy Hield and Tyreek Evans, it's unbelievable. That there should have been a bidding war. They should have gotten, and maybe the market never developed because DeMarcus Cousins is going to need a contract. Maybe they were too late coming to the table to trade him. But this is one of those times where it's not so much the economics. It's not the rich getting richer or the poor getting poorer. It's the dumb being dumb, And if you're a Sacramento Kings fan and that's your owner and Vlade Divac is your GM, it feels hopeless. It feels utterly hopeless. And not because your perception of them is bad. This is reality. It's not perception. What those guys are doing is they're getting beat. They're losing the game of poker on the trade market. And it's one thing to miss on draft picks. It's one thing to miss on free agents and not find a way to get your team to the top. But it's quite another to get fleeced along the way. To trade your best pieces and not get equal value. To wait too long to maximize value in the trade market. These are the kinds of things that make fans, it loses generations of fans. And Sacramento Kings fans have had it tough. They had to fight off their team moving to Seattle at one point. They survived that. They get the new owner, and all of a sudden they realize the new owner maybe isn't all that he saved them from losing their team, but in another way he's losing the team. And it's just frustrating and embarrassing. It's kind of similar to when Randy Lerner sold the Browns, to Jimmy Haslam. And I know I always tie things back to the Browns, but I'm a Browns first guy, and I assume a lot of you are Browns first people. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this. But that's the idea, It's like if the NBA had hindsight and they could redo all that happened with the Sacramento Kings, do they approve this owner, Vivek Ranadive, or however you pronounce his name? Do they approve him? If the NFL has it to do all over again, do they approve the Jimmy Haslam ownership? Like, if you got Jimmy Haslam in an interview and you asked him, hey, do you think the NFL would have confirmed you as an owner if they could have had the benefit of 100% full hindsight? Like, you'd be crazy to think the answer is yes. There's just no way. There's just no way. And so it's a tough road. It's a tough road for the Sacramento Kings. And, man, you know, just as a sports fan in general, I feel their pain. I really do. I really do. It's painful. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about the Browns and the draft, because on Friday, I wrote, on the heels of reading some Bill Barnwell, I wrote that I was finally coming around potentially on the idea of trading down, and I never, ever thought that I would be a proponent of the Browns trading down, just because there's some logic to the idea of just stop trying to be smarter than everybody and just take the guy, just pick the guy. Don't get value for the guy and try and as Bill Simmons used to say, 4 quarters doesn't equal $1. You know, Phil Taylor plus Brandon Weeden plus blah, blah, blah does not equal Julio Jones. You know, these are the kinds of equations. But on the flip side, if you try to apply that same logic at Browns front offices, it really comes down to, are you good or are you bad at picking players? Because when the Browns didn't trade down, they traded up for Trent Richardson. That didn't work out either. So does that eliminate that as a strategy, or was that just a Mike Holmgren, you know, running roughshod in a bad process? You know, I think that's the answer. It's not good strategies by bad practitioners look like bad strategies. And bad strategies run by good practitioners might look like good strategies. It's about the practitioner. And so we have no control over, you know, first of all, we don't know the whole Paul DePodesta and Sashi Brown and Andrew Berry. We don't know if they're good practitioners yet or not. We have no idea. So when you're judging the strategy, you have to judge the strategy on face value. And so Bill Barnwell made some compelling cases that when the consensus number 1 overall player is a position player, there's probably not that much drop-off, if any drop-off at all, between the number 1 position player, in this case a pass rusher, and the number 2. I can't name the number 2 pass rusher in the draft right now because I haven't done all my homework yet, but is it so far out of the realm of possibility in your mind that the second best pass rusher in this draft might end up doing better or performing better or being healthier, just random stuff, than the number 1? The idea is that the difference between the number 1 and the number 2 quarterbacks should be really, really big. The difference between the number 1 and number 2 wide receivers could be ginormous. But the idea that the difference between the number 1 and number 2 pass rusher and the number 1 and number 2 left tackle might be a lot less. Might be a lot less. I mean, those guys are more subject to system and position and scheme and plan. At least that's what I'm telling myself. That's what I'm saying in my head. And so, because there is no number 1 quarterback on the board, and no, I don't believe that there's a number 1 overall quarterback in this draft, as much as I like Deshaun Kaiser, as much as I like some of the other guys, I really don't think there's a number 1 overall quarterback in this draft. So if that's the case, and despite the fact that I cringe when I think about trading down yet again because of Julio Jones, because of, you know, fill in the blank, even Sammy Watkins, but how much of that is because the Browns selected Brandon Weeden? And how much of that is because the Browns selected Johnny Manziel with those extra draft picks? The Browns could have ripped off the team that they were trading with in either of those scenarios. But by picking the players they picked and the result, they're going to look like total losers. So it's kind of a hindsight is 20/20 kind of a thing. The Browns could have selected players that they wouldn't feel like they missed out on Julio Jones, as good as he is, as great as he is. And so I'm now considering trading down just because, I'm not going to pretend like the Browns have Myles Garrett on their roster. I'm not going to pretend like Jamie Collins can somehow make up for not drafting Myles Garrett. But I do think that the Browns could probably trade down a little bit, especially in a draft where the quarterbacks aren't number 1 and number 2 overall, or at least I don't think they are. I think the Browns can probably do that and get some really good value for trading down. And maybe this will be the forever loss of Myles Garrett, but that will be the result of a lot of things. I mean, would we think about Julio Jones today if the Falcons hadn't made the Super Bowl? I mean, we'd miss him, and we'd talk about what a bust it was. But the fact that they just played in the Super Bowl, even though they dropped a 25-point lead or whatever it was, that's the reason why we're talking about Julio Jones right now more than anything else. And Julio Jones had a huge impact on why the Falcons got to where they got. But on a 53-man roster and with coaching changes and all these different variables, this idea that we continue to try and make all our storylines about one name is ridiculous. We do it with the quarterback. We do it with Tom Brady. We do it with Bill Belichick. It's always, and that's the craziest thing, is we make it about one guy twice on the Patriots. It's all about Bill Belichick. Oh, it's all about Tom Brady. Well, which one is it? No, it's both. It's everything. It was Gronk helping, even though Gronk didn't play in the Super Bowl, he helped them get there. It's everything. It's all of them. It's McDaniels. It's the whole package. And so when we do this post hoc analysis of Browns trade down decisions, we make it all about one guy and the one guy that the Browns drafted wrong, or one guy that we missed out on and the guy that the Browns drafted wrong. We're oversimplifying it. It's all part of a larger strategy with a bunch of variables, and it's not about the strategy, it's about the practitioner. And so if you don't believe in Sashi Brown, Paul DePodesta, and the practitioners that the Browns have in their front office, none of this conversation matters anyway. It's not necessarily about the talent on the board. It is about the talent on the board, but it's also about what you do with them when you get them. And so you've got to not only draft the best possible guys once you get them. And that's really what it comes down to. So that's the way I'm feeling about the NFL draft. I can't believe yet again I'm considering a trade down. But the Browns have number 12. They have number 1. If they can trade down somewhere, 4, 3, they let somebody else trade up and do the Trent Richardson thing. Let the Browns trade down a couple slots. Maybe still get the number 1 quarterback off the board if that's somebody they want. I don't know. But if they can fleece another team for value and still get 2 first-round picks this year and some additional players next year, I think we'd be crazy not to consider it, just because Tom Heckert and Ray Farmer, failed to do good things in the past. That doesn't ruin trading down forever any more than the 3-4 is a bad defense because the Browns weren't able to execute it over the last 6 years, whatever, since they switched to it. I guess it hasn't been that long. They had the 4-3 with Holmgren. I don't know. Whatever. It's not about the 3-4 or the 4-3. It's not about trading down. It's not about the strategy. It's about the practitioner. And that's what Browns fans better hope. They better hope that Sashi Brown, Paul DePodesta, Andrew Berry, Hugh Jackson, and the rest are more capable than the ones we've had in the past. And certainly you better hope they're more capable than whatever's going on in Sacramento right now and that Demarcus Cousins trade. We'll see what happens there. Maybe the NBA steps in and nixes the trade like they did the Chris Paul trade once upon a time. Probably not, but maybe. All right, that's it from me. Thanks so much for listening. This week we'll have Jim and I'm blanking. I just think of him as Snarky Hat Man. Mike Hattery. We'll have those guys back doing their outfield roundup. The EHC position previews for the Indians continue, which is going to be great. I'm looking forward to the outfield preview because there are some moving pieces, especially as we await any kind of news that Michael Brantley might be back. So check in for those. I think we've got one more week until the next Hot Sports Boys. Let me know how you like that one. Any feedback is always welcome. I got some feedback from somebody in email this week. I'm teasing that. We're going to hear about that one a little bit later this week. So for all of us at the Waiting for Next Year podcast, which is now just more than me, which I love. I love Scott's. If you missed Scott talking to Dane Brugler, you should go back and check that one out. That was one of the most downloaded podcasts we've had in a long time. Certainly the Indians positional previews, and Dave and Dylan and Yezin and the boys at the Hot Sports Boys taking on overtime as a concept was really fun. So go check it out. Thanks for listening. Tell somebody about the podcast, subscribe, do all those kinds of things that they tell you to do on other podcasts, except do it for this one. Until next time, it's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.